Welcome to this video, and in this particular video we are going to take a step forward with our complete React series. Okay, in this particular series we are learning React from scratch, from beginner to advanced, and in this particular video we are going to cover React hook. Now what is React hook? All of that from scratch. If you've never heard of this term hooks, then too you can watch this video. We cover everything from scratch. So we'll start with what is React, what are React hooks, why they are needed, what is a state. Okay, so we are going to talk about, in fact, React hooks, and we are going to talk about this hook called useState hook, using which you can manage the application states. All right, so in fact this video title should be React hooks and useState hook. Okay, so I'll just update this. Okay, so this is what we are going to talk about, useState hook. Okay, so yes, this is one of the hooks that we will cover. Okay, and when you're working with components, what states are, how you can manage states, and how you can make use of this hook to manage component states. All right, so that is all what we are going to talk about. We are going to go hands-on with this, wherein we'll work with functional components to set their states. We'll create multiple states. We'll learn about the asynchronous nature of the state. Okay, now this is important if you're performing multiple updates, so that there's a lot of valuable information out there. Passing arrays and objects into state. How can you manage different data types, basically. States and props. So we already have this concept of props, which we spoke about already in one of my past videos, like previous videos in this series. So we'll talk about how states differ from props. So then we are going to do a couple of projects where we are going to make use of useState hook, basically to manage form inputs. Okay, so we will see how you can make use of this hook to manage form inputs, and then we'll also build our own color picker app. So this will basically give you some projects into your portfolio, and it will help you with some hands-on learning, wherein you have a chance to implement things that you have learned in this particular video right away. All right, so do watch this video till the very end. The link to the GitHub repository or the entire source code is there in the description below. You can take a look at it, and also the link to the entire playlist is also in the description. So if you're willing to get the link to the playlist, this is what the playlist is. Okay, and you can see there are 3 videos right now, but there is a 4th one as well, which has been scheduled, but it's not appearing over here. Because it's not published yet. All right, but yeah, there is video number 1 wherein we start with React, video number 2 wherein we talk about fundamentals, video 3 wherein we talk about JSX, and then we have one video on components and props, and then we come over to React hooks. All right, and this is all freely available. You can access it anytime, and be sure to follow this playlist with a plan. Okay, so watch one video daily. I would recommend that plan over here, because these videos are not that long. It's hardly 30 minutes to 1 hour time. Okay, so I would request you all to try out this and follow this playlist day wise, and yeah, keep building. So basically whatever I'm teaching, I teach in a hands-on way, right? So whatever we saw in this particular, whatever we are going to learn actually in this particular video or in my past videos, everything is hands-on. Okay, I don't teach a lot of theory. Okay, I make sure that theory, you learn about theory, okay, but in a hands-on way. So that's really important for you as a software engineer. So whatever I'm teaching, be sure to have a second screen or a second tab or a IDE window open, wherein you can experiment and try out whatever I'm showing it to you. Okay, so that's really important. And yeah, that is it. So this is what the playlist is. And if you love my work, be sure to subscribe, like, and enable the bell notification icon. That helps me, and it impacts my ability to bring in more such amazing free content onto this platform. Now be sure to comment and let me know if you're following this particular playlist. I would love to hear from you. So without a further ado, let's jump right in. Hey there, now it's time that we begin talking about React hooks and understand what they are. All right. Now, whenever you are building any sort of web applications, and if you're building any sort of functionality, okay, whatever programming language you're using, whatever framework you're using, there will always be scenarios wherein you would want to add some dynamic behavior to the elements onto the web page. right? For example, on click of a button over here, for example, okay, I might want certain page or certain part of the page to be updated just on the click of this button. Now the thing over here is only that part is supposed to be updated and not the entire page. But what happens is in traditional web development, if you click on the button, the entire page reloads just to update that particular part. That is traditional web development. But with React, you have a way wherein you could add dynamic behavior to components, making them interactive, responsive without needing a complete page reload. Okay, so this is possible with the help of the concept of hooks. All right, now hooks are nothing but special features that let you add a dynamic behavior to component, and it's just not about updating the page without complete reload. Okay, there are a lot more things that can be possible with React hooks. So updating the page without complete reload is just an example that I gave you to help you understand. All right. For example, I have this code base over here. Okay, this is from Code Sandbox. It is a publicly available code base developed by someone. And here I saw this code wherein there is a counter created using React. Okay, so here I can say increment, you can see, and this is decrement. Now on click of these buttons, it is incrementing and decrementing without page reload. And this is possible with the help of React hooks. Okay, now this is one possibility. There are n number of possibilities. There are different kinds of hooks available in React that you can leverage to do different kinds of stuff. And every hook that exists has some sort of speciality in which you can use it in your application. All right. So what are hooks? Hooks let you add some interactive features to your application in a simple way. And it helps you to make your app more interactive, where things change as you interact rather than a static web page, right? So this is a very useful, this kind of functionality, like this kind of feature is very useful if you're building a sort of form, let's say. And depending on what user is typing or any sort of handling you want to do for the user input, any sort of data updates. For example, user typed over here and you might want something to be updated at different parts of the page. So all these updates can be driven smoothly, giving your users a better experience, right? And this makes your web app very engaging and responsive. Now here in the official documentation of React hooks, you will see that hooks lets you use different React features from your components. Okay, and like I said, there are different kinds of things that you can do with React hooks, and that is what is being termed as React features over here. Okay, so now talking about hooks, there are built-in hooks as well that React provides, and you can combine them to build your own as well. So you can even create your own custom hook, right? And here on the left hand side, you will see the list. Okay, so use action state, use callback, use context. These are all hooks. All right, there are quite a few. Okay, we'll be talking about the most important ones. For example, some of the hooks that are used a lot is useState. So if you're working on React, you will see useState being used a lot. useRef being used a lot. useEffect is also one hook that is always used in React code base. So we'll talk about hooks that are very common. Okay, and once you get hold of a few hooks, then it will be very easy for you to build your own React applications that make use or leverage React feature right from within the components. All right, so this is React hooks. There are quite a few that we need to learn and understand how we can make use of and why they exist, right? Every React hook has some ability that it provides, and depending on your need, you decide as to which hook you want to implement in your application. All right, so that's about React hooks. I hope this gave you a decent overview of what hooks are and why they should be used in React. Hey there, so now it's time that we begin talking about states in React, and it's important that we understand this concept so that we can make use of useState hook in React, which is one of the most commonly used hook in the React applications, right? So what is a state? Now, a state is any kind of information that your web application might want to store, all right? Now, of course, here you can see this application. Okay, and here at the top you have some settings. Okay, now this setting will enable me to put on a light mode or a dark mode, so I can like turn on this. Okay, there is this button also. I think this is for okay, so this is for translations, I believe. All right, but this is also a setting. If I want to see the website in some other language, I might choose a different language from here. If I don't want the dark mode, I can change the mode from here, right? So what is happening over here is this website react.dev is storing a kind of setting or a preference for me as a user, right? So I am a user, I'm interacting with this website, I'm setting up the preference as dark mode. So it is keeping this preference in mind that, hey, this user wants to see or read this website in dark mode. And whenever I'm visiting, it is showing me the preference. Whenever I'm visiting, it is showing me the website in that particular way, right? So this is a kind of information that it is holding about its user, right? Now think of this like a bookmark that you would use when reading a book. So imagine you are reading a novel, and as you progress through the chapters, you keep a bookmark to remember where you stopped, right? So this bookmark, which changes as you move forward, or sometimes you revisit the previous chapter, the bookmark would change, right? So it represents your current position in the book. So it's an information that you are trying to remember about your reading journey, right? So it's an information, right? So that is this information that is being stored by any sort of web application in the React world is known as a state. Okay, so state is like that bookmark we talk about, or even like this setting, because it is remembering this information about the user, right? Bookmark is also something that the application would remember about the user as to where the user has reached, what is the journey of the user, right? So to put it simply, states is a way states in React is a way for React components to hold on to some information that can change over a period of time, and it needs to be remembered. All right, remember this definition. So states in React is a way for React component to hold on to some information that can change over a period of time, and it needs to be remembered. Okay, now in this particular definition, two things are important. So I would just switch over to the definition over here in the notepad, okay? And I believe this is good because you can see as well the definition, all right? So there are two things I was saying which is important, okay? There are a few things I would say, okay? So one is the information can change, okay? This is something that you need to keep in mind. The information can change, and this information is being held in this as a state in React, okay? And it needs to be remembered, all right? Over here, the example I gave, this needs to be remembered, right, throughout my journey. Now, if I switch over to Learn tab, now what I mean over here is if I switch over to Learn tab, this does not change to white mode. It is still dark mode, right? So the application has remembered that this user wants to see the entire application in the dark mode, right? Same goes with bookmark, right? The application would remember that, hey, the user has finished reading until this point. So it will remember and it will keep on remembering. Tomorrow, if you open the application, the reading application or the book, it's not like the bookmark has changed to the first page, right? So when building interactive stuff, interactive applications, you will often come in situation where certain parts of your interface should change in response to the user interaction. For example, a button click, like I said, here a button click is changing the entire website, right? And there will be scenarios wherein you might want to change a particular parts of the website as well. Okay, like button click, form submission, or simply hovering on an element. Okay, hovering on the element. Okay, so all of that could be managed with the help of state. All right, I hope this is pretty clear. Okay, so if you remember this definition over here, state in React is a way for a React component to hold on to some information that can change over time, and it needs to be remembered as well. Okay, this is a really good and the simplest definition that I could have for this. Okay, now there will be some questions that you might have. Okay, you will be like, hey, why not just use variables? Okay, come over here. You said that state in React is a way for React component to hold on to some information that can change over a period of time. You can do this with variables as well, right? You can store some information into variables, and that information can change as well provided it's not declared as a constant, right? This is possible with variables. So why have this new concept of state and introduce unnecessary complexity? The thing over here is states are different from that of variables. How? I'll give you a gist, okay, but you will understand a complete picture only when you see it in action. But I'll give you a gist of how they are different. So the state in React, the magic of state in React is that whenever it changes, React knows to automatically re-render the component or a part of it to reflect those changes on the UI. That is the magic of the state. Okay, so the updates, the reflection of updates. So whenever you click on this, okay, for example, here, if I click on this, you can see the entire web page is being, or this particular page is being re-rendered automatically. This component is being re-rendered automatically based on this button click. Okay. Tomorrow I might have a button that might introduce a change in a certain parts of the application. So on click of that button, state is changing, and because the state is changing, that part of the application which is tied to that state re-renders. Okay, I'm not sure if you're able to grasp this, but the magic lies in re-rendering, which is not possible with variables. Okay, with variables you have to handle everything in React manually, but with states everything is taken care of because it's a feature that React is providing, and you'll see this shortly when I give you a demo of this. Okay, so the magic of state in React is whenever it changes, React knows to automatically re-render the component to reflect the changes on the UI. Okay, this is important. Now, another question some students might have is this one. Okay, how is it different from props or properties that we pass down to the component? Okay, now I would like to add over here that props, which are also known as properties, are like a setting or attribute that you pass down to component. Okay, they're read only. First of all, you cannot change the properties also, right? And they're only passed in one direction, like from our parent component to the child component, right? So props are different. The use case is different. It is like some information or setting or attributes that you might want to pass down to a particular component. They're different from states. All right. So remember this, a state in React is a way for a component to hold on to some information. So holding to information is an important part of this definition, and that information can change over a period of time and it needs to be remembered. This is important. Okay. How is it different from variables? If you are asked in an interview, yes, it is different because React, it works with React components. States work with React components. They are tied to React components, and React knows how to re-render the component automatically if there is any change in the state. Okay, this is not possible with variables, right? And they are different from properties. Okay, because they are read only. Properties are read only, I mean, right? And states are different. So I hope this is pretty clear. I hope I have been able to break this down in very simple terms for you. Okay, you will gain much more clarity as and when you start using states, and when you see your first program using React states, you'll understand how amazing this is. All right. So I hope this was useful. So now it's time that we go hands-on with useState hook over here in React. All right. And for the same, I have this particular project created. It's a very simple project. Okay. Here you can see this is the code that I got generated using Vite and React. And here I have this app component. And this app component is basically rendering a heading. Okay, it's just printing hello over here. Okay, and this app is being rendered here in main.js. Okay, main.jsx, I meant. Okay, so there's literally nothing in app component, and what we are going to do is we are going to learn how you can make use of states in React with the help of hooks, and we are going to do this with the help of by building an example actually, and the example is going to be a famous counter example. So basically this is one of the best examples I feel to learn about states, because you can update the value of the counter, increment, decrement, and play around with it. All right, now talking about the output, this is the output that you're seeing from this application. All right, So what I would do is, first of all, since we are wanting to make use of useState hook, okay. So I'll tell you first of all what is useState. So useState is a hook that is provided to us by React, which enables us to add states to functional component. So this is a functional component, right? Functional component meaning components that are created with the help of functions, all right, in React. And if you want to add state over here, we want to display a counter over here, right? So counter is an information that we want to display. The counter, we should be able to increment the counter as well as decrement the counter. So we should have two buttons over there, right? So in order to keep a track of what the counter number is, okay, in order to keep the track of what the counter number is, we need state. And how do we add state to a functional component? We make use of useState, right? So this is a hook that is provided to us by React, and it makes our life easy when using features like state in functional components. All right. Now I'll come over here. How do you make use of this? Okay, so I'm going to say import, and I'm going to say over here useState, something like this. Okay, and you can see it auto populated useState from React. All right. So what this is doing is we are importing useState hook from React module. Now React module has this named export, which we can import. All right, and we'll be making use of this over here. Okay. Now over here within app, what I'm going to do is I'm going to define a state which is going to be called as count. Okay, so I'm going to say const, and I'll show you the syntax first, and then I'll explain you what this syntax means and what is happening behind the scenes. All right, so I'm going to say count, and I'm going to have set count over here, and I'm going to make use of useState over here, something like this, and I'll pass in an argument over here which is 0, and I'll end this with a semicolon. Okay, so we have added a state into our application. This state is called as count, right? And this is a function which helps us update this particular state. Okay, so now we are making use of useState over here to create a state. Now what happens is whenever you are using useState, this is an inbuilt function that returns an array with 2 items. Okay, it returns array with 2 items. The first item is the state itself, and the second item is the function to update that particular state. Okay, so it returned 2 items, and what we did is we made use of destructuring over here, array destructuring, because this is returning in the form of arrays. So we made use of array destructuring, and we got the state name, like the state as count, and the function as set count. All right, so that is how useState works. Okay, remember, it is returning the state and a function to update that particular state. All right, so that is this is something that we have for count now. Now you will ask me, what is this 0 over here? Okay, so 0 is nothing but the current value or the starting value that you want the state to be initialized with. So when this count is created, its initial value will be 0. Okay, so I hope this is clear as to what this line is doing. Okay, to put it simply, we are creating a state over here, and whenever we create a state in React, we make use of useState hook like this, wherein you can pass any sort of default or initial value that you want to have. Okay, and useState returns an array which consists of 2 things. One is the state itself, and other is the function to update that state. Okay, so we got both these, the state and the function, in these 2 things over here using the concept of array destructuring. All right, I hope this is clear as to what we are doing. Now what I would do is here, instead of saying hello, I would say counter value. Okay, I'll say counter value, and now the state is it just like a JavaScript variable, right? So I can make use of this syntax and I can display count over here. Now the moment I save this, and if I come over here, you'll see counter value is 0. Okay, if you make 5 over here, and if I save this, you'll see counter value is 5. So we are seeing the initial value as 0 and 5. So I'll stick to 0. Okay, if you want the counter to start from 5, you can have 5 as the initial value over here. All right, this is done. Now how do we update the state? So you have this set count function which you can make use of to update the state. All right, so what I would do is I would have a button over here. Of course, we would trigger updates using this button. Okay, and I'll call this button as increment, and I'll have one more button over here, and I'll call this button as decrement over here. Okay, we'll first work on increment and we'll see how we can increment the value of a counter. Okay, so I'll say on click over here. This is on click, and here I need to trigger set count, right? So set count will accept a parameter which is the updated count value. So what I would do is I would have a arrow function over here, and I'll say set count, something like this, and I would say the current value of count plus 1. Okay, that is what I want to initialize it with. All right, and I'll come over here. You can see these two buttons, increment, decrement. You can increment, and you can see we have just incremented count over here, right? Have we done anything else? We have just incremented the count, and just by incrementing the count, the component is being re-rendered, and you are seeing the updated value of count being displayed over here. Okay, let us do the same for decrement as well. So if you click decrement, nothing will happen for now, but what you can do is you can copy this over here, and you can paste this, and instead of incrementing, I'll say -1, and I'll save this. And if you come over here, now you can decrement it like this, increment it like this, and you can see you have a very nice counter in action. And look at the amount of code that you have written. You've hardly written few lines of code, right? There's one line, and these are the 2 lines, like 3 lines basically, right? This is what you have done, right? And React is doing so much internally. Okay, so let me tell you, whenever you are updating count over here, React is re-rendering the component because it knows that the value of this state has changed, and this state is associated with this particular component. So what it's doing is it is triggering a re-render, and with the help of the re-render, the component is being re-rendered and you are seeing the updated value being displayed. This is much more efficient than rendering the entire page. Okay, it is just updating certain parts of the application from the efficiency standpoint. All right, so this is a very good feature of React useState hook, okay, which we are using actively right now. Okay, we can even break this down. Okay, so right now what we are doing is we are actually having the logic over here with the help of anonymous function. Okay, what you can do is just for the sake of simplicity, you can have a constant increment count over here. Okay, something like this. So this is a function that I'm creating. Okay, and over here, okay, sorry. So what you can do is over here, increment. Oops. So it will be an arrow function, and what you can do is you can say set count is equal to count plus 1. Okay, and you can have set count is equal to count plus 1, end it with a semicolon, and end this as well with a semicolon. Right, and I'll have this over here. I'll say increment count. Okay, so that is what we are doing. We're keeping we are now defining separate functions over here. I can say decrement count over here, and this can be negative over here. Okay, and in the same way this will be decrement count like this. Okay, and you can increment the value, you can decrement the value. Okay, and you can increment or decrement the way you want. Okay, so this is something that is possible over here. Okay, so yeah, I hope this was clear as to how you can make use of a useState hook to add states into your React components. Okay, what we have done over here as a recap, we have added a count state which for which we use useState hook, and this useState hook returned the state as well as the function to update the state, and we got these two using the concept of array destructuring. Right, over here we have this initial value defined as 0 for the state. Okay, and we have 2 buttons using which we are modifying the state value, and whenever we are modifying the state value, what is happening? The component is being re-rendered and the count is updated automatically. Okay, so I hope this is pretty clear, and I hope you have a good understanding of what states are and how you can make use of states in React. Okay, now one thing I would like to tell you is this thing over here. Okay, there is this question that students normally have: why not use variables instead of states? Okay, so I would like to mention the magic of state in React is whenever it changes. Okay, so imagine handling all of this using variables. Imagine having a count variable and not making use of useState hook over here. Okay, you would have to re-render or update the component manually, okay, which is not good. Here React knows automatically that you have to re-render the component to reflect the changes in the interface, and this is really beneficial and helpful if your application grows big, right? If your application grows big, you're making use of multiple state variables, you're managing a lot of stuff. In that case, this becomes really helpful. Okay, and it is different from props because you cannot modify props in the child components. They are read only, and states is something different that allows you to have a better control and better management as compared to variables as well as props. All right, I hope this has been useful and I hope you have been able to follow along. So right now we have this application which is having two buttons, increment and decrement, and we are making use of useState hook to increment and decrement and manage the state for this particular component, and we are making use of functional component over here. Now the thing over here is we just have one state. Now when you're working with React functional components, thanks to the useState hook, you're not limited to a single state variable. You may declare as many state variables as you need. Now, when state values are unrelated, like there will be scenarios wherein you want to keep track of multiple pieces of information. Like for example, here we are keeping track of count. Okay. Now you might want to keep track of one more value, and when these values are unrelated, it makes sense to keep them in separate state variables. And this can help you make your code cleaner by grouping related data and separating the unrelated data. All right. Now, let us see how we can add one more state in this example over here. So here we are simply incrementing the count by 1 and decrementing as well by 1. Now, let's say I wish to have a I want to give you a customization to my users wherein user can tell me like whether I want to increase the count by 1 or whatever value. Okay, so what I will do is I'll add one more state over here. I'll call this state as step. Okay, and this step will define the increment and decrement should be or by how much. Okay, so what I'm going to do is we are going to replicate this similar syntax. Okay, we're going to say use state, okay, over here, and oops, and over here I'll call this as step, and I'll call this as set step, something like this. Okay, and the default value that I'll have is 1. Okay, because the default increment and decrement value that I want to have or I want to give to the users is 1. Okay, now this is done. Now over here, what I will do is I will have an input over here. Okay, so let us say here, let me go back and I'll say input. So I will add this just before increment and decrement over here, just after h1. Okay, so I'll say input over here, something like this. Okay, and for input, okay, I'll have the self-closing tag. I don't need this over here. Okay, and over here I can say type. Type is, what is the type over here? So we are working with numbers. Okay, so I'm going to say number over here. Okay, and I'll also say value. Now what is the value for this particular input? So I need to bind this to the state variable. So I'll say step over here. Okay, I'll go to the next line and I'll say on change. So basically if the user changes anything in this particular input box, I'm allowing changes, right? So on change, I wish to update the state, right? That is what we'll do. So I'll say on change, and over here, I'll have a function. I'll say e, okay, and I'll make use of arrow functions, and I'll say set step over here, okay, and I'll pass in e dot target dot value. Now the thing over here is this value will get passed as a string, right? So I can say parse int over here, and I can wrap this up entirely into this parse int. Okay, so what is happening is we are saying e.target.value. So basically this is the element, okay, and we are saying we are getting the value from this element and we are passing it to set step. What is set step over here? Set step is the function that is responsible for updating this state, and it is being called on change. So any changes in this input box will be reflected into the state. Okay, it's binded now, right? Now on incrementing and decrementing, I need to make use of a step over here. That is one change I need to make. Okay, now let us test how our application looks. So you can see the default is 1. I can increment, decrement over here. If I make default as 10, and if I start incrementing, you'll see 9, 19, 29, 39, and I can decrement as well. If I say 5 over here, I can say, you can see over here, it's updating accordingly. Okay, so depending on what the value I'm changing over here, okay, it's reflecting the change. You can see. So here, in this example, we are making use of 2 state variables, I would say. Okay, one is count, another one is step, using a step by which we want to increment the count. All right. So yeah, having multiple state variables in a single React component is absolutely possible. You can use multiple states to keep track of unrelated information that you might want to keep track of within a particular component. Okay, you can even beautify this if you want to. So over here, this app is not looking that great. We are not impressed, right? So what you can do is here, you can come and I'll add some CSS over here. Okay, so over here, for example, I'll say for input box. Okay, I'll say input over here. For input, I'll say width of 50 pixels. Okay, and I'll say padding of 5 pixels. Okay, something like this, and I'll say margin over here, margin of 10 pixels. Okay, and border, we'll add a border. I'll say 1 pixel solid, and I'll add the color code as #C, and radius. Okay, border radius of 4 pixels, something like that. Let's see how our input looks. Input looks decent, you can see. Okay, and we can add a little bit of CSS to buttons as well. The buttons that we have, they look pretty raw, right? Pretty raw HTML buttons. So we can have padding. I can say padding of 5 pixel over here and 10 pixel over here. Okay, and you can say margin of 5 pixels. Okay, border, I can say none. All right, and I can say radius. I can say radius of let's say 4 pixel, probably similar to that of the input. And I can add a background color. Okay, background color of #007BFF. I have a like color code over here. You can even add a light blue over here if you wish to. Okay, to keep things simple. So I'll just say light blue. Okay, or just say blue over here, blue, right? And you can see color as, of course, white. So this is for text. And then you can have cursor. Cursor can be pointer. Okay, and then you can have a button : hover effect. Okay, so what is the hover effect for this? Hover is the background color update will be dark blue. Okay, so this is done, and let us save this and let us see how this looks like. Okay, this looks pretty decent, I would say. Okay, better than the earlier version. You can see it's a decent CSS. Okay, you can add a lot more over here. Okay, if you wish to. Okay, so at the top here, I have this app container. I have a margin. You can have margin, let's say, of 20 pixels. Okay, so I've added margin of 20 pixels, and this looks decent. Okay, so I think the app is looking decent right now. All right, and you can improve the CSS further if you wish to. Okay, but we are since we are learning, I think that's absolutely fine. We are able to see the functionality work and how the React concepts are coming to life. All right, so I hope this has been useful, and I hope you had fun. So now it's time that we talk about state updates. Now we have this counter application where we are able to increment or decrement the counter based on the button clicks. All right. Now, whenever you are performing state updates, you need to remember a couple of things. First important thing is state updates are asynchronous in nature, which means that they are not in sync, and What React does is it batches multiple state updates together. Okay. Now, whenever you are doing multiple state updates, you are supposed to make use of an updater function. Now, you will ask, what is an updater function? So, updater function is an arrow function or a simple function that is passed when updating the state of a particular variable or a particular component in React. Okay. Now, let me give you an example for this. All right. Now, let us say we have this increment count. Okay. I can increment it by 1 or whatever the step is. Okay. Now, what I would do is let me add one more button over here. Okay. So, I'll add one more button. Okay. And I'll say increment or let me add +2 over here. Something like this. Okay. So, what this will do is it will increment it twice. Okay. And I'll say increment twice over here. All right. This function does not exist. So what we will do is we will come over here to increment count and I'll duplicate this and I'll say increment twice, something like this. Okay. Now what I want to do is I want to increment this twice. So I've incremented this once and I'll increment this twice over here. Okay. If I come over here, you will see this button. Now ideally on click of this button, the counter value should be incremented 2 times. So from 5, if it's 5, it should become 7. If it's 0, it should become 2. Why? Because I'm updating the state twice, right? Now, let me show you an example or let me show you a demo of this. Okay. I've saved the file and if I do +2, you'll see it is incrementing by only 1. Okay. Let me do a refresh. From 0, it will be 1, 2, 3 and so on. Okay. It is not incrementing it by 2. And the reason for this is state updates are asynchronous. Okay. So it batches multiple state updates together. Now what is happening is over here, writing this set count or count +1, it is equivalent to having 0 + 1 over here and 0 + 1 over here. It is equivalent to this. Why it is equivalent to this? Because the initial value of state is 0. Okay. If the initial value is 1, then it is equivalent of writing 1 + 1 and 1 + 1. The previous value, so basically you are updating the count over here to 2, right? So this is not being taken into consideration when executing the second line. The initial state of the count is taken into consideration. And the reason for this is because it is asynchronous and the multiple updates are patched together. So I'll just do Control-C. Okay. So this is not going to work. All right. So what I will do is I'll make use of an updater function. Okay. So we need to make use of an updater function for multiple state updates. So I'll just comment this out like so. Okay. I'll paste this over here. Now to make use of updater function, we'll make use of a very simple arrow function over here that is going to help us perform the update. Okay. So here I'm going to say count or previous count over here as this. Okay. Something like this. And I'll have this over here. Now, previous count over here, this particular variable is having the value of the previous value of count. Okay. So I'll take this over here and this will come over here. Something like this. Okay. And now let's see the output. So now if I refresh, if I do +2, +2, +2, you can see it is incrementing by twice now. Right. So this is working fine. And what change we did is we are now making use of this arrow function over here. Okay. Which is just doing the job of taking the previous value of count and incrementing it by 1. Now, this is just a convention over here where I have made use of this variable called priv count. So normally it's a convention. Normally you would see if you read code online, you will see whatever the state variable is, the first letter is converted into capital, like C is capital over here, and priv is added at the or before the state name over here. Okay, which indicates that it's a previous value. Okay, you can also make use of C and C over here, C and C. The output is not going to change. Okay, so that's just the convention. If I do a refresh and if I play it again, you can see like it's incrementing by twice over here. So whenever you are wanting to do multiple state updates together, okay, it's best to make use of this kind of a syntax wherein we are making use of an updater function. Okay, here what is happening is previous value of the state is taken in C and it is incremented by 1, and then for the next call, previous value, which is the update like the one after the count is updated from this particular code over here, that is passed over here, and then it is incremented by 1. So you won't face any bugs if you're doing things this way. Okay, it's a very common issue wherein developers do things this way and they are like, hey, there is some inconsistency in my code and I'm not seeing the desired output. And the reason for this is simple, because of the asynchronous nature of updates. Okay, so update a function is helpful in this particular case. Here, in this particular case, if you're writing code this way, the updates are queued. Okay, so this first one is performed and then the next one is queued. And then once the first one is over, this one is executed. And until then, it's in the queue. Okay, so this is how you can batch or do multiple updates together. Remember, state updates in React for components are asynchronous in nature, and you need to make use of updater functions for multiple state updates. Now, what are updater functions? Like I said, it's a simple arrow functions that you are passing to the updater function over here. So this is the function that is being used to update the state. Okay, and you're passing the updater function here to update the value. All right. So I hope this was useful, and I hope you have been able to follow along. Hey there. So in this video, we are going to build an application that is going to help us manage multiple counters. All right. So when I say it is helping us manage multiple counters is you can add counters on the fly onto the page. You can even increment separate counters individually. Okay. So let me show you. I have this counter over here. Okay. And I can increment it 1, 2, 3, 4. This is counter 1. Okay. I can add a counter the way I like. I have added 5 counters over here. I can increment the one depending on my choice. And you can see every counter is having its own count over here. Okay, it's not overlapping in any way, and it has its own button that is listening to the event. And whenever you are clicking this particular button, the state corresponding to that particular counter is incremented, or the count corresponding to that particular counter is incremented and not the others. Okay, and you can add as many counters as you like depending on your need. Okay, as long as you like. All right, you can even enhance this application to add a decrement button, to add a state, to add a step over here. Okay, so with step you can take a number which will decide whether it should increment by 1 or what number it will increment by. Okay, so you can do that, and you can even add a button to delete the counter. So if you want to delete a specific counter, you can select it and delete it. So that's the enhancements that can be done. Okay, but right now this is what the example is going to be. It is a list of multiple counters put together with its own count that is being displayed and its own increment button, which can help us increment the count of the respective counter. All right, ready? So let's jump right in. So here I am in the application and I have this file app.jsx, wherein I have a couple of imports at the top, and I have this function or a functional component being created with export, and it is simply displaying hello right now, right? And you can see hello as the output over here. Okay, now the point that I want to demonstrate over here in this video is the point that I'm going to talk about is you can store arrays, objects, and even more complex data structures in a state. Okay, so state is just not limited to a normal variable. It's not like you can store a single value in a state, but you can have complex things like arrays, object, and even more. Okay, and that is what this example is going to be directed towards. Okay, so if you take a look at the application that we are going to build, okay, we need a list of counters, right? So within app, what we are going to do is I'm going to create a state over here. Okay, so I'll say const. Okay, and instead of counter, I'm going to say counters over here, something like this, and I'm going to say set counters over here. Okay, and I'm going to say use state over here. Okay, and we need an initialization block over here, right? So I'll initialize this to default, and the default will be this over here. Okay, so I'm going to say ID, and ID will be 1, and I'm going to say value, and value is 0. Okay, so this variable or this state essentially is having the list of all the counters in the form of an array, and every counter over here is a key value pair. You can see this is one counter, okay, which is having its own ID and its own value. Okay, so this is counter 1 and it's an object for counter 1, and you're having an array of counters over here. You can say like this is holding an array of counters, and a single counter is nothing but an object which is having ID and value as its attribute. Okay, so that is how it will be maintained over here. I'll just take this to new line so that it's visible on a single screen over here. Okay, so this is clear, okay, why we are having this kind of a thing. Okay, now the next thing that I want to add over here is a function. Okay, I'll say const add counters over here. Okay, and this is a function that will help us add new counters onto the interface. All right, so it's an arrow function, and over here I'm going to add a semicolon and I'll have the logic over here. Now to add the counters, what we need to do is, okay, so let me take this array. Okay, so this is the array. Okay, let me take this in one line. This is the counter, right? Now to add one more counter to it, what I need to do is I need to take this entire thing. Okay, I need to say comma and I need to add this over here with the ID 2, right? This is how I'll add one more counter. If I need to add one more, what I'll do is I'll say comma, I'll add the same thing and I'll convert this to 3, right? So this is how I'm adding counters, right? Now, how can I implement this logic over here, right? So what I need to do is I need first the list of all the current objects that exist, okay? And I need to append one more object in the end whose ID is incremented by 1. I repeat. So the logic over here that I need to implement is have the list of all the current objects that exist for the counter, okay, in the array, and then add one more object in the end whose ID is incremented by 1. You can see. How would we do this? So I'll get rid of this over here, okay, this thing, and what I need to do is I need to call set counter first thing, because we need to update this over here, right? So I'll say 3 dots. I'll make use of the spread operator. I'll say counters over here. Okay, so I'll spread the existing value of counters over here. Okay, I'm sorry, this needs to be it's a function call, right, over here. Okay, so first I'll spread the existing value of counters, and then I'll say ID colon, I'll say counters dot length plus 1 over here, and I'll say value 0. So this would be my logic basically to add new counters. I hope this is making sense over here. Okay, so what we are doing is we have created a new arrow function called add counters. All right, and we are calling set counters. Why are we calling set counters? Because it's the state update function for counters, right? Now, how do we update the state? What value we are updating it with? So whatever existing, so we need to add an array. Okay, we need to update the existing array with a new array. Okay, we need to update the existing array that it's holding. So this is the existing array, right, that is holding. It is having one object. What we need to do is we need to make use of spread operator and get all the counters spread over here. Okay, and then we need to add one more in the end. We need to say ID is counters.length plus 1 and value is 0. Okay, the moment we do this, it gets added to the existing list, and now counters is going to have two counters over here, one with ID 1 and other one with ID 2. And then if you call add counters again, what it's going to do is it's going to spread both over here and it's going to add the third one and so on. Okay, so I hope this logic is pretty clear. We are making use of spread operator over here, and we are crafting a new array that is replacing itself with the existing one for counters. All right, so this is done, add counter. Now what we need to do is we need to come over here, okay, and I need to add a button. So I need to update the UI over here. Okay, so I'll say button, I'll say on click. What should I call on click? I'll call add counter over here. Okay, and I'll say, okay, so it's plural, so I'll say add counter over here. Okay, like this, and I'll say add counter, something like this. Okay, and I'll close this button over here. Okay, and we also need to display the counter, right? How do we display? So we'll display it as an unordered list, a simple unordered list using these HTML tags. Okay, and I'll say counters.map. So we are making use of map over here. Okay, and here I need to say counter. Okay, so for every element in the counters, I'm saying counter. This is, I'm accepting this as a parameter, and I'm having this basically I'm having this arrow function over here. Okay, and what I would do over here is I would create a list over here. Okay, something like this. Oops, li, and I'll create a list. Okay, now what this list is going to have, it's going to have a key. Of course, we need to add key so that the rendering is optimized. So it will have a unique ID, which is counter.id. Okay, and here I need to display counter. Okay, and we can display counter.id. So I need to have a UI which says, okay, so the UI I need to display is counter1 colon the value. Okay, and then it has a button here. Okay, then it has a button. Oops. So then over here there is a button. This is the UI that I want to have, right? So I have counter, and 1 is nothing but the ID, counter ID. I'll add a colon over here. Okay, I'll say counter.value. Okay, I want to display the value because 0 is the value, and then I need to have a button. Okay, so I'll add a button. I'll take it to the new line, and I'll say button. Okay, and on click, there has to be an on click event. All right, and on click, okay, something like, I need to link it to a function. Okay, it will be an increment counter function which does not exist yet. Okay, so I'll just have some empty thing over here. I'll just keep this empty. Okay, and here I'll say increment. That is it. All right, and I need to get rid of this text over here. This is just for explanation purpose. I'll save this and let us see the UI. Are we able to see it? Yes. Are we able to add the counter? Let us try. You can see. Awesome, right? Increment won't work because we have not created that function. We are just calling a empty thing over here, right? So how this is working, how add counter is working. First, we are maintaining the counter this way. Okay, so if this is not clear, let me explain it to you, okay, in a more clear way. Okay, I'll take every step over here to make sure you understand. Okay, so this is when counter count is 1. Okay, counter count is 1. Okay, when counter count is 2. Okay, counter 2. What will happen is when you add one counter, this gets updated to. So this gets updated to this thing over here. There is one more. This is ID 2. Okay, when the counter becomes 3, like there are 3 counters. Okay, or 1 second, let me say when 1 counter. Okay, I'll just copy this. When 2 counter and when 3 counter. So this is 2 counter and this is 3 counter. Okay, now when there is 3 counters, what you do is you add the third element over here. This is the third counter over here. Okay, this is how counters are being managed. Okay, I hope this is making sense. So this is when there is only 1 counter. Okay, so counter is represented. So counter can be represented by 2 things. One is the ID of the counter and other thing is the value. Okay, so initially we have 1 counter with ID 1 and value 0. That is what we have initialized it with, right? And what we are doing is we are rendering it. How we are rendering it? So if you scroll down over here, okay, we are saying for every counter, make use of map method over here, because we are making use of map over here because this is being stored in an array. It's an array of objects, right? Every counter is represented this way, right? Counter is represented this way. And to represent multiple counters, we are creating an array, right? This is an array. You can see the elements are being added. Okay, when 3 counters are added, you can see 3 elements are there, right? So we are saying counters.map. Okay, for every counter, we need to display the counter ID. We are not displaying the counter ID, but we are adding it to the key. and we are displaying the counter ID like this. Okay, we are saying counter 1 and we are having the value being displayed. And on click, we need to perform the increment, which we are not doing right now. Okay. And when we say add, so when we click this button, add counter over here, what is happening is this function is being called. What this function is doing is it is adding one element in this array. You can see over here, it is adding this element in the array, but it's making sure that ID is incremented by 1. Okay. So how is it adding one element in the array? It is spreading the existing elements. It is creating a new element, new array by spreading the existing element and appending one new element in the end. So how is it crafting a new array? It is creating a new array over here by spreading the existing array and appending a new element in the array in the end, and it is making sure that its ID is incremented by 1. That is how it's doing it. Okay, so this is done. I'm not deleting this. I'm just having this in the form of comments. I think this is good for understanding purpose. If you are still confused, then looking at this, everything should be cleared, right? Because this is how counter looks when there are 3 counters being created. This is how the state would look like. Okay, now this is done. Now what I need to do is I need to have increment counter. Everything is done, right? Increment counter. So this is working fine. If I refresh, it's initialized to 1 first, and if I add multiple counters, you can see the ID is also being incremented. Okay, so I'll come over here. What I would do is I would say over here const. Okay, I'll say increment counter. Okay, increment counter, something like this over here. Okay, I'll have ID over here being passed and an arrow function. Oops, arrow function, something like this, ending with a semicolon. Now, how can we increment the counter? So we have the ID of the counter, right? How do we get the ID? We're getting it over here, and we need to pass it over here. Okay, how do we pass it? So we can say over here, this is an arrow function. So I'll just remove this. I'll say increment counter, and I'll say counter.id, something like this. So we are passing the ID of the counter. So we know which counter is being incremented. Okay. Now what we need to do is we need to search through this array, and we need to get the counter whose increment button is clicked or whose ID matches, and we need to increment the value and update the value to the incremented thing over here. Okay, so how do we do that? So what we need to do is I'll first come over here. I'll first say counters dot map. Okay, and I'll perform a search over here. I'll go through the entire array over here. I'm going to say how I'm going to search. I'm going to say counter.id is equal to ID. Okay, and if it's equal, then what do? We increment. Okay, I need to add the logic for increment, else you just have the counter over here. Okay, you don't make any change. That is how the logic would work. Okay, and also the output of this should go to set counters, because we need to update the state, right? So I'll add the entire thing to set counters. Okay, now how will the logic work over here? So what would be the increment logic over here? I would add a pair of curly braces. Okay, I would say spread the counter over here and update its value over here. Okay, I'll say counter dot value plus 1. Okay, so what this is going to do is it is going to spread the current counter along with its attribute, and it is going to override the value over here, and it is going to increment the value by 1. Okay, rest all the attributes are left as is. So first it spreads the counter over here, and then it updates the value attribute of the counter with the new value. Okay, and that is what is returned. And if this is not a match, so this is executed only when it's true. If this is not a match, what happens is the current counter is being returned. Okay, I hope this is making sense. And then if I come over here, let us test this. If I increment, you can see it's working fine, right? You can see the entire application was not reloaded even after we added the function. Okay, but only the relevant parts was reloaded because the counters are still there. the entire reloading, this is how the entire application reload looks like. Everything is reset, right? So that was not done even though when we added a new function, right? So that's the beauty of React and states over here. So you can see this application is working as expected, okay? And I hope this is giving you a good gist of how you can have complex data structures like arrays, objects, and even more complex data structures in state. And here is how you can make use of it, okay? It's a pretty decent example, or a good example, I would say, that helps you understand the power of states and how you can work with states to create wonders, I would say. All right. So I hope you have been able to follow along, and I hope so this is some basic CSS that I have in place. Okay. It's not much. Okay. But super basic stuff like container styling, H1 styling, input styling, border styling, button styling, and hover styling. So simple CSS I have, which was already linked to this particular file. Okay, so I hope this was useful, and I hope you have been able to follow along. Well, I thought I should talk about state and props side by side and compare them based on certain parameters so that there is no confusion among students. So I'll have some sort of comparison over here, like in terms of definition, immutability, data flow, example, and the use case. So when we talk about state, by definition, state is specific to components and determines how the component would render, behave, and look. When it comes to properties like props, I would say props is a short form for properties, right? They both are same, props and properties, and it's a way of passing data from a parent component to that of a child component, right? So this is like the difference in terms of definition. When it comes to immutability, state is mutable, so you can change the state, and of course, if there is any sort of changing data that you want to keep track of, usage of state is recommended when you're working with components. When it comes to props, whenever you're passing props from a parent component to that of child, the components cannot change their props. They can only use them. All right. When it comes to data flow is local to component. For state, the data structure might change over time due to interactions. Okay. And for props, it's a one-way data flow from parent to child. Example of this is how you create a state. Okay, so here you are creating a very simple counter state, initialized to 0, and you're making use of useState hook. And for props, here is how you pass props. So you're making use of welcome component, and you're passing in name prop over here. Use case. So use case is to make use of state within components to keep track of data that is going to change. Example, user input. If you're building forms, keeping track of what all user has filled in the form and all of that. All right. So such is the use case for state. For props, if you need to pass any sort of data to a particular child component that shouldn't change and won't be changed by the child, that is when props are supposed to be used. So I hope this is pretty clear as to how these two differ. They both have their own place in development and their own set of importance as to why they exist. All right. But yeah, this is the difference, and this is one of the common confusions. So I thought I'll address it with the help of this slide over here. Hey there. So now it's time that we talk about how you can build a form using React and manage all the data with the help of state and useState hook in components. All right. So this is what we are going to build. I actually have the demo over here, and you can see there are different kinds of form elements that we are going to play around with. So first you have a normal text box. Okay, and you have a checkbox, you have radio buttons, you have select box, and you can see all the form data being updated live over here. Let me give you a demonstration. So whatever I enter over here or whatever I select will be displayed over here. Okay, so here if I say, hey, you can see this text appear over here. Okay, I can say, I love React, something like this, and you can see any sort of updates I make, those are also reflected in real time. I can select the radio buttons. You can see option 1 being displayed over here, If I switch to option 2, you'll see option 2 over here. Same goes for checkbox. I can see checked and unchecked, and for the select as well. You can see option 1, option 2. Alright, so this is a form that is completely being managed by React with the help of useState hook, and you can see how it is able to update one part of the application whenever there is a change in another part without refreshing the page. That's the beauty of React, right? So you can see how it's working. You can even, like, if I update anything at any point in time, you'll see the update being reflected without the page being refreshed or reloaded. All right, so we'll be building this hands-on, and we'll be going through every step as to how you can build this, and this knowledge will be really helpful if you're planning to use React for building forms, dynamic forms with some robust validations. So here we are in the IDE, and this is the starter code that I have over here. It's a component called app component. Okay, the name is app itself, residing in the file app.jsx, linked to a CSS called app.css, and the CSS file literally has nothing. All right, so we need to work on this. It is simply displaying one header over here, or I should say one heading called hello on the web page. All right, so we'll begin with this application. First thing first, what we are going to do is we are going to make use of useState over here. All right, be sure to import useState at the top. Okay, I already have it imported. Okay, so we are going to make use of useState. I'm going to say constant. I'm going to have a state created called form data, and I'll have a set form data function over here. Okay, and then I'm going to make use of useState like this, and yeah, what is this going to be initialized to? That's interesting. So this is a object basically that will hold the entire forms data. So we have text over here, right? We have a checkbox, okay, and the initialization of checkbox is false over here. We have a radio, which is being initialized to something empty or no data as such. This is also empty. And then we have over here select, something like this, okay, like so. So this is what the initial initialization. It is an object with these attributes. All right. Now what I will do is I'll start building in the form over here. Okay. So I have this H1. I'll change this to, I'll change the text to form example. Okay. I'll save this. Okay. This is done. And here then I'll have this class name as form container, something like this, form container. This will be helpful for CSS later on. I'm going to have a form tag, which is the HTML form tag. Okay, and now I'm going to start working on the elements one by one. So first element I'm going to have is text input. Okay, and the next one I'm going to work on is the checkbox, something like this. Okay, so we'll first cover these two and then we'll move on to the next. All right, so yes, the text box. What do we need to do for text box or text input? All right, so I need to have a div first. Okay, I'm going to call this div as okay, oops. All right, I messed up with my keys over here, but this would be class name. Okay, and I'll call this as form field over here. Okay, and this will go over to a new line. And form field, I'm going to have a label first. Okay, so the label is, what is the label? It will be text. We need to enter the text. You can add any sort of label like name or something like that if you wish to. Okay, input field, it's an input field. What all attributes I need to set for this? So I'll first say this is of type text. Okay, then the name is text over here. Okay, name is text. Okay, 1 second. So I'll just press tab so that it's indented. Okay, name is text. What is the value? So I need to link it to the value, and the value is over here form data dot text, something like this. Okay, and then I need to have on change over here. Okay, on change, what should happen? We should call a function called handle change. Okay, though this function is not yet defined. Okay, so we need to define that function as well. I'll just have an empty function over here being created so that we don't land in any error. So I'll say const handle change over here. Okay, and I'll have e being passed in. Okay, and I'll just have it empty over here. No problem whatsoever. Oops. So there's a syntax error. Yep, this looks good. All right, it's an arrow function, right? So I just have this handle change, and here, if you come, I'm linking it to handle change. All right. Now, whatever you are initializing it with, okay, since you are linking this text box to the state over here, whatever you initialize text with, if I say ABC and if I save this, you'll see ABC being appear over here, right? Because that's the initialization, right? So I've kept it empty for now. Okay, but this is the div or this is the component, or this is the, I should say, this is the UI for text input. All right, let's move on to the next. So after text input, we have checkbox. So let me copy this div first of all. Oops, I'll have this div over here. Okay, it's a form field as well. It has label. Instead of input, I'll get rid of this input. So here I can say instead of label over here. Okay, so label will have how this checkbox will work with within this over here. I'll have input. Okay, and over here I'll say type is equal to checkbox, something like this. Okay, name I'll say checkbox. I'll keep the name and type same. Checked. Okay, this is a checked property which I'll link it to form data. I'll say form data dot checkbox. Okay, this is done. And on change, I'll say handle change. So there is a single function that we have now, okay, to handle all the changes, right? And yeah, I'll close it. It's a self-closing tag input, or you can have it separate closing as well. Okay, so this is done. Label, and here after input, probably you can have 1 second. So you can have checkbox, something like this. Okay, and you can see the checkbox over here, right? So checkbox is done. Okay, the form is not looking pretty. Don't worry about that because we don't have any sort of CSS yet, right? So now I'll have a comment. I'll say radio buttons. Okay, how do we work on radio buttons now? Okay, so we'll have to create a radio button, right? So I'll paste this. Okay, this is a structure, and I'll get rid of the input over here. Okay, or what I can do is I'll stick to this input. We'll change the types. Okay, this is radio over here. Okay, and the type over here for radio is radio. Copy this radio. Text is radio. Okay, form data dot radio. Okay, the option for checked. So this won't be there. It will be checked over here. Okay, type named, and I also need to add value over here. Okay, value is equal to, I'll say option 1. Okay, something like this, and I can say radio is equal to option 1. Okay, and on change there is handle change. Okay, and here I can say after input or after label. Okay, so this is the label tag. Okay, within, okay, this is within input. So if I save this, okay, I'm seeing radio over here, but I need to add one more label which is wrapping this, right? So I'll say label, and I'll close this. Okay, and this closing will go after the input, and we need to have a label saying option 1, something like this. Okay, so you can see option 1 over here. Okay, I'll duplicate the same thing entirely. Okay, in fact, okay, and I'll scroll down over here. So after the label closing tag, another label opens radio, and this is option 2, and the radio option over here is 2 for this. Okay, and the text is 2. Okay, so this is it. Okay, I think this is looking good over here. Okay, there's no like CSS, so don't worry about that. Okay, but these are our radio buttons. We have a couple of options. Okay, now this is done. We have div. Okay, And now what we need to do is, one second. So this is div over here for this. After this div, I'll add, okay, what do we need to add? Drop down. Okay. Now for drop down, I need the div. Okay. So I'll scroll up. I'll copy this text input div. Let's come down. Okay, and over here I'll paste this. Okay, now for drop down, what we need to do is we'll say over here select. Okay, this is select, and instead of input, so we don't need to say input over here. We'll have select over here, right? And the label is there. Okay, but this will be select. So I can say we don't need this. This is very input specific, right? So I'll just get rid of this. Okay, and we'll say select. Like this. Okay, and for select we're going to have multiple options within select. Okay, so this is option 1, but for select we need to set some properties. So I'll say name of select is equal to, what is the name? It's select. Okay, what is the value over here? So value is form data dot select, something like this. What is on change? On change, it's handle change, right? So I'll say handle change over here. Okay, now coming to options, we have option over here. Option value is equal to empty, no option. Okay, and the first option is about choose an option. Okay, so we'll display this at first. Okay, choose an option, something like this. Okay, so you can see choose an option, right? Now I need to replicate this, okay, across. So I'll copy this and go in the end. You can paste this once and twice. All right. So this is done. Okay. Now value for the next one is option 1. Okay. And here you can have option 1. And the value for 2 is option 2. And here option 2. All right, so this is done. You have like option 1 and option 2 coming in. All right, so this is done. Now we need what we need is we need a checkbox, or I believe checkbox is already added. Drop down radio button checkbox. So this is done. Now what we need to do is we need to display all the data as well, right? So here, after the last div, or before the last div I should say, okay, here I'll add a div. Okay, this is the div, and I'll call this, I'll add a class name over here, class name as that of form data. Okay, and over here I'll say h3. Oops, h3, it should be h3, I'm sorry. So this is h3 over here. Okay, and I'll say form data, something like this. Okay, now we'll display the form data one by one. Okay, so how are we going to display? First, we'll have a p tag. Okay, within p tag, we'll have strong tag. Okay, strong. Within strong, we'll say text. So we'll display everything one by one. So we'll say text. Okay, and here, after outside strong, I'll say form data. So I'll have this JavaScript. I'll say form data over here dot text. Okay, and if this is not there, then I'll say in/a over here. Okay, so this is done. This is how we are displaying this is how the display would work. You can see. Okay, form data.text or NA. So if form data.text is nothing, then NA is being displayed. And we need to do this for all. Okay, so we'll come over here. We'll replicate this for radio, and we'll say form data.radio over here. Otherwise, this will be okay. So for radio, this won't work, or this will work. It won't work for checkboxes. Okay, so I'll add for checkbox over here. Okay, this is for check box over here. Okay, so for checkbox, we need to take special care. Okay, because if form data.checkbox is true, then we need to display checked and unchecked, right? So I'll say question mark, else false condition. So I'm making use of ternary operator over here. So I'll say checked and unchecked. Something like this. All right. Radio is done. We have select. Okay. So I'll say select, something like this. And here I'll say select. Okay. This is done. Okay. We are displaying the data also. We have the view for displaying the data. All right. Now what we need to do is we need to implement the most important function over here, which is for on handling the change. So I'll scroll up over here. Okay. We are getting E over here. Okay. Which is the event. So I'll say const. And I'll say name, we'll have value, we'll have type, and we'll have checked over here. Okay, so this is what we are creating, and I'll say e.target over here. Okay. Now over here, what we need to do is after creating this, we need to set the form. Okay, so I'll say set form data. So essentially, what I did over here is in the line number 1, I've destructured the e.target over here. I've destructured it into individual elements, and I'm saying set.form data. Okay, I'll craft this new object over here. Okay, and I'll say 3 times form data. So I'll make use of I'm doing destructuring over here. Okay, form data, comma, and for name, what I would do is if name type is equal to checkbox. Right, so we need to like have the checked value, right? So I'll say checked colon value, something like this. Okay, this is done, and yeah, this is also done. If I save this, let us see what the output is. So you can see the thing is being updated, checkbox, checked, unchecked, option 1, option 2, and you can see option 1, option 2 being reflected. So it's working absolutely fine. All right, we are able to make use of on handle change to like update the form data. Okay, so we are destructuring the form data over here, whatever form data is being whatever form data exists over here. Okay, and then what we are doing is we are updating the values this way. So the application is working fine. What we would do is we would simply beautify it a bit. All right, so a little bit of beautification is important, okay, so that it looks a bit more presentable. So I'll start with some CSS over here for the form container. Okay, I'll have max width as 400 pixels over here. Okay, I have margin over here, which I'll set to 50 pixels and auto. I'll pass in these 2 things. Okay. I'll have padding over here. Padding, let's set to 20 pixels. Okay. Border radius. Okay. The border radius I'll set to 8 pixels probably. Let's see. Okay. And I'll say background color. Okay. Background color can be, let's say, white sort of a thing. Okay. Sure. I've added a sure. All right. You can choose the way you want. Okay, I'll have box shadow over here to 0, 0, 10 pixels RGBA, and I'll set the value of over here to 0, 0, okay, 0, 0, and 1. Okay. So this is what I'm setting it to. All right, and yeah, this is it. I guess font family we can. Okay, if you need font family, and I'll say sans serif over here. Right, this form container h2 and h3 tags will have a text align of center over here, and color as that of gray. Okay, something like this probably. Okay, or color of dark gray, depending on your choice. Okay, or you can simply set it to black over here. Okay, this is also good. Okay, h2, h3. Okay, now this is done. I'll have form field. So all the form fields. Okay, how do we do? So we'll have margin bottom over here. I'll set the margin bottom to 20 pixels. Okay, save it. And yeah, this is it. Let me come back to this if needed later. Label. So I'll say display of block over here for labels. Okay, you can see a change in the UI. I'll say font size. Font size is 14 pixels. Okay, I'll have a weight over here. Weight of bold over here. Okay, and then I'll say margin bottom of 5 over here. Okay, and color, let's keep color as hash 33. Okay, yep, we're done. For label, I'll say input, and I'll have the type as text over here. Okay, so type is equal to text. Okay, something like this. Okay. Now for text, what I will do is I'll say width of 100%. Okay, this is it, first thing. Now I'll have padding over here of 10 pixels. Okay, I'll also add select also to this CSS. Select. Okay, and then I'll say border. Oops, so there will be a semicolon. Border. Now for border, I'll say 1 pixels, solid, hashtag CCC. Okay, it's white sort of a gray sort of a color code. Okay, and radius 4 pixels over here. Okay, and font size of 16 pixels, like so. Okay, this is looking okay. All right, if you take a look at the app, it's looking okay, not bad. Okay, let us work on this further. So I have this input for I have the CSS for text. Let's add some CSS for checkbox as well. So I'll say checkbox. Okay, and I'll say margin right. Okay, margin right. Let's add it 10 pixels. Let's see. Okay, and for radio also, I'll add some for radio. For radio, I'll just add margin over here of 5 pixels. Okay, little bit of alignment over here. Okay, and now let's align the form data. So I'll say form data. So form data is the class for the data that is being displayed at the bottom. Okay, so I'll say margin bottom. Margin top, I'll start with 30 pixels. We have some room there. We get some room. Okay, and padding. Oops. Padding of let's say 10 pixels over here. Okay, I'll add color, background color. Okay, background color is of we can keep background color as something. I have a color code actually. Okay, it's E9 F7 F9. Okay, something like this. It's a white sort of a color. Okay, you can see this. And the outer color is not good in that sense. Okay, so what I will do is I'll take this color and probably CCC, or if I scroll up at the top over here. Okay, this is Azure. This is not good. So I can like change this to F9 F9 F9. Okay, so maybe this is looking okay. Okay, so this is grayish and this is bluish. Okay, so yeah, that's what the styling that I'm using now. And background color, I have border as well, border of 1 pixel, solid. Okay, and hash, I have a color code A3T2T6. You can use the color code or you can choose something resembling. Okay, depending on your preference. It's blue sort of a color scheme that I'm using. Okay, cyan blue. I'll add border radius of 4 pixels and we are done. Okay, I'll say form data. P tags. Okay, what do we do to P tags? I'll say font size of 16 pixels. Okay, let us see. And color, I'll say hash 555. This is done. Okay, strong. So when you say strong, okay, I'll say color of hash 333. Okay, I think this is looking decent. Okay, let us add something for, I think this is done. Okay, nothing else is needed, I guess. Yep, I think this is looking decent. Okay, so the application is working fine, you can see. All right. And CSS is also looking decent. If you want to improve more, improvise more, you can absolutely do it. Okay. But yeah, this is very much presentable, and whatever you type in, you can see how it's being updated. Okay. So yeah, this is how we can manage the form data. We are making use of one state over here, okay, which is having an object with all the attributes. Now you have more fields being added to this form, you have more attributes being added, and you can manage them in the same way. All right. I hope this has been useful, insightful, and helpful as well. Hey there. So now it's time that we begin building a project which is a color picker application using ReactJS. Now, this will help us reinforce a lot of React concepts and help us practice a lot. All right. And this could also be a great portfolio project to showcase in interviews and in resume, right? So this is the application. Here you can see few color tiles that you can select, and the moment you select any of the color tiles, you will see the color switch this way, right? And additionally, apart from this, if you want to add any other color, you can select over here and you can like get the color changed, right? So this is completely dynamic. You can see the way or the moment I'm dragging the slider, okay, you'll see everything being changed, right? So it's very dynamic, okay, in that way you can see it's very dynamic, right? So this is the color picker that we are going to build, okay, and this is going to help us practice a lot of React concepts. All right. So without a further ado, let's jump right into the editor and let's get started. All right, so here we are in the coding editor, and here to begin with, I have a basic React app setup with app.jsx returning this markup over here that you see, and here you see the output, which is color picker. So there's literally nothing in the project right now. We're just like returning a h1 tag that is giving the output as color picker header, right? Now we need to start building the application. So we will begin with these states. All right. Now at the top, I am already importing useState hook. All right. So what I need to do is I need to create a state, and the thing that I need to keep track of is, of course, you must have guessed it by now. It's background color, right? Because that is what we are playing around with, right? In this application. Okay. So background color over here, and I'm going to say set background color over here. So background color, something like this. Okay. And yeah, this is done. And then I need to have useState over here. So I'll say useState, and I'll have a default color initialized. So the default color can be white. Okay. And then I can save. Okay. So this is done. We have the state set. I'll add a semicolon in the end. Okay. Now, what I need to do is I need to add an interface over here to show the tiles basically of color, right? And those would be the tiles basically that a user can click on and get the background color changed at instance, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a array over here. I can say colors over here, and it can be an empty array right now. Okay, I'll shortly add some colors over here. Okay. But we also need to render the array, right? So whatever colors we are seeing, we need to render it, and we have an array. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a div over here. I'm going to add class name to this div so that I can add CSS later on, and I'll call this as color palette, something like this. Okay, now over here I'm going to say colors dot map. I'm going to make use of map over here, map method, and I'm going to say color comma index. Okay, these two things we are going to make use of. Okay, make use of arrow functions, and here we are. Okay, so within this, whatever you add would be implemented for every element in the array. Okay, and what we want to do to every element in the array, we want to display it, right? So I'm going to add a div over here. Oops. So I'll add a div, something like this, and okay, why didn't it close itself? Okay, so I'll close it manually. All right. So here we have div Okay, and I'll add a key, something like this. Okay, 1 second. So I'll say key is equal to, and I'll say index. Okay, and class name, and I'll say color box. Okay, I'll just add a CSS over here. Sorry, class name over here, so that I can add CSS later on. Okay, and I can say on click over here. So on click, I need to, of course, so on click there was an interaction. Okay, and I need to add an interaction. The interaction will be that the background color should change on click, right? And I need a function for that, which we don't have right now, which is absolutely okay. So I'll just leave this as empty, right? Now this is done. Okay, we have this div, we have this over here. Okay, and what I need to do is I'll scroll up over here. We can add some colors over here in the array. Okay, now what colors should we add? Okay, I do have some color codes, so I'm going to type them manually. Okay, so I can say FF0000. Okay, let me save this. And we are not seeing any change over here. Okay, okay, we are not seeing any change because we are actually so I'm just rendering the div over here, key, color name, and I'm just showing the click over here. So I'm not seeing anything because, okay, it's not, there's nothing in the div, but what I will do over here is, since the class name for this is color box over here, I'll just add a width over here of 50, let's say. Okay, and I'll add a height over here of 50 pixels. I'll save this over here. Okay, and so we are not seeing the output yet. What we need to do is I'll scroll over here and let me see. Okay, so there is one mistake that I've made. This shouldn't be curly brace over here. Okay, this should be ideally round bracket. Okay, and I'll just take this round bracket and I'll replace it with this curly brace. Okay, so this entire thing, the div thing, should be within round bracket over here. And if I save this, I won't see anything yet, but there is a div added. Okay, we need to just add background color to this div. So I'll say style. Okay, so style of background color over here, something like this, colon color. Okay, like so. Now you'll see the div being shown over here. Okay, so what is happening is, I'll tell you. So this is the color red. This is the color code for red. Okay, if you Google this, you'll know what this color code is. And what I'm doing is I'm taking this color, or all the elements in the array, I'm iterating through it. Okay, using this color.map. Okay, and I'm accepting these two parameters in this arrow function, color and index. Right now, for every element in the array, I'm getting color and its index. Okay, what I'm doing is I'm saying render a div, okay, whose key is index. This I'm doing for optimization, like better rendering purpose for React. I have a class name, and using this class name, I'm setting the width and height as 50 pixels so that it's visible, because there's literally nothing in the div. And then I'm setting the style over here to the color value that we have over here. So this is what will be set. And then I have an on-click event listener, which I haven't handled yet. Okay, you can say I don't have a function defined for that. Okay, so I've done this. Okay, and this is it. What we need to do is I'll grab a few color codes that I have and I'll paste it over here. So I'll paste it over here, and you can see it's a long array. Okay, you can add your own color codes or you can refer to this one. So if you Google over here, color code, and you can search for this one, you'll see this is the color code. Okay, and you can go to this website like colorhex.com and you can get any sort of color code you want to. Okay, so color names. So here you can see absolute 0. You have the list of all the colors along with their color codes. So you can pick the ones that you want to display, or you can take mine. Okay, that's absolutely fine. Okay, but I'm just showing you way as to how you can get your own color codes as well. Okay, so I've added this and I'll save this. So the moment I save it, you will see like all the color codes being displayed over here. So as of now, you're just seeing these buttons. Okay, there's no styling, nothing happens if you click on this, right? It's just there. Okay, now what I will do is I'll write a function to handle the click. Okay, so I'll say const, I'll say handle color change. Now I'm calling this handle color change for a reason. Why? Because on click of this div, the color should change for the entire page, right? So that is why I'm saying this. I'll say color over here. Okay, and here, what I will do is I'll say set background color. Okay, and I'll pass in color, something like this. Okay, and I'll end this. Okay, and now what I will do is I'll come down over here, and what we need to do is here, instead of having an empty arrow over here, I'm going to say handle color change, and I'll pass in the color. Okay, so what the function does is the function actually will change the background color for whatever color you're passing in over here. Okay, and I'm doing that. If I select blue now, okay, so it doesn't work. Let me see what the issue is. Okay, on click, I'm saying everything correct. Okay, here handle color change, I'm passing in the color as well. Okay, I'm closing in the div. Okay, I understood the issue over here. Here we are just updating the state, right? This is function we called to update the state over here. So background color has the updated value of color, right? Now what you need to do, you are not yet setting it into the background of the div or the page. So what you need to do over here is we'll come over here. Okay, div class name color palette. Okay, not this one. We'll add it to the parent div over here. Okay, so here what I will do is in the root div, I'll say style. Okay, and what is the style? Style is background color. Okay, so here we have background color. Let us see how this works. So you can see the background color is changing now, right? You can see. So yeah, this is what it is. Okay, the functionality is working fine. Okay, and what I will do over here is I'll add a class name also so that I can make use of it later on. All right, I'll say app. Okay, we'll use this class in CSS. Okay, but for now, I hope you have a clarity as to how the color change is working. Okay, this is done. Now, what do we need to do next? What do we do next? So next is we need to have a custom color picker as well. So if a user wants to select any other color apart from the ones that are available over here, what I would do is I would add a custom color picker. So I'll say div. Okay, and over here I'll say class name. Okay, you'll add a class name. Class name can be custom color picker, something like this. Yeah. Okay. Now over here you will have input. Okay, we'll be accepting input over here. So I'll say type as color. All right, and then over here value. So what is the value? The value can be background color. Okay, now background color is the state, remember, that we have wherein we are maintaining the state of the background color, and we are updating it from these divs also on click. Okay, so we are assigning the value that is there in the background color to this color picker. Okay, and what we need to do is on change. Okay, we need to have an event. If anything changes over here, I'm accepting E. Okay, and I'll say handle color change. Okay, and I'll pass in E dot target dot value, something like this. Okay, this is done. I'll save this, and we'll see a color picker over here. You can see it's not beautifully styled, don't worry about it, but you can see the dynamicity over here. This is React, right? So we are making use of state over here, the concept of state, to like bring in a dynamic feel into our background. Okay, and you can see how this is working. Okay, it's not looking beautiful right now, I'll tell you. So if you go over here, this is the full page application. It's not looking beautiful, right? It's not beautiful, of course, because there's no CSS literally, right? So we need to add CSS to beautify it a bit, but yeah, I hope you guys get a sense of what's happening. All right, now what we will do is we'll add some CSS. Okay, so I'll start in the CSS file. Just make sure that the CSS file is linked over here and it's imported over here, import./app.css, and make sure to have this file in the same folder. If it's not there in the same folder, be sure to have the right path. Okay, it's in the same folder, so I'm referring it to as ./app.css. Okay, now over here, what we need to do is we'll say .app. Okay, and I'll say font family, like so, and I'll say Arial, this one. Okay, and in the end, okay, there was a semicolon. I can say text align. All right, and I'll say center. Let me save this. Okay, some changes I could see, some good changes. All right, and now I can see padding. Okay, padding we can add 50 pixels. or let me keep padding of 0 pixels over here. Okay, let us see what happens. I'll say minimum height of 100. Okay, and then I'll say color. Okay, so color, let us add, I have a color code hash F0, 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 something like this. It looks like a white color, or light text for dark mode is what you can say. All right, so this is done. We'll keep the CSS for app this way. I'll have H1. Okay, and I'll say color. Okay, so color, I'll keep this one the same. Okay, this looks cool. I think we are all good. Okay, now let's add the CSS for color palette. So I'll say color palette. Okay, something like this. And here I'll say display flex. So I'll add a display of flex. Okay, you can see how it became horizontal. Okay, the moment we added this property. I'll say justify content to center. Save this. Okay, and I'll say gap of 10. Okay, 10 pixels. So every element will be spaced at the distance of 10 pixels. I have not saved this change, but here if you see, it's not, there's no spacing in between, right? It's working fine, but there's no spacing in between. So I want to add some space. So I've added this gap 10 pixels. The file is not saved yet. The moment I save, you'll see how it changed, right? And if you see over here, you can see 10 pixels, right? This is working fine. Okay. So here gap of 10 pixels, and now I'll say margin of top over here. Say 0 pixel. Okay, 10 pixels. Sorry, not 0. This is okay. All right, and color box we have 50 pixels. 50 pixels. I'll say cursor pointer. Cursor will keep to pointer, and I'll say border. Okay, border is 2 pixels. Solid, and I'll say hash ff. Okay, so this is it, and let us save this. Okay, so we have some border and we have this hover effect, which is looking decent, I would say. All right, now we need to style the color picker input as well. This is not looking that good, right? So I'll say dot, and I'll say custom color picker. Okay, one second, is this a class that we have? Let me scroll down. Okay, yeah, this is a class, I remember. It's custom color picker, and within this we have input, right? So I'll say custom color picker over here. Okay, and within this we need to add, let's say, margin. So right now there's literally no margin between these buttons and the color picker. So I'll say let's add a margin of 20 pixels like this. Okay, there's some gap now. Now what I can do is I'll copy this, and here we'll add the CSS for input as well within this. Okay, so I'll say for this, okay, get rid of this. We don't need margin top. So I'll say cursor pointer. Okay, this is done. I'll say border as none. Okay, we don't need any sort of borders. So you can see this looks cool. Padding, not that cool. We need to add some padding, 10 pixels. Okay, and we'll add radius, border radius. Let's add a border radius of 5 pixels. Okay, and we can add color over here, triple F. Okay, this is done. I think this is it, and we need to add hover effect. Okay, so I'll say custom color picker input colon hover. Okay, now what is a hover? So I'll say background color of hash 55, like so. Okay, so far so good. Okay, now if you come over here, this is a full page application. You'll see like how it's displaying the color, and here also you can change this. All right. Now, if for any reason, if you're not liking these white patch beside the entire div where you are rendering this color picker, so this entire thing is being rendered in the color picker, and there is this white patch, and this white patch we have not added, right? So what you can do is here, if you want to reset the default style, so what you can do is you can add star here. You can say margin, okay, margin 0, and I'll say padding 0. Okay, and let us save this and see. Okay, you can see it went away, right? So yeah, this is working absolutely fine. If you want, you can add a sort of gap over here at the top above color picker. So you can come to the code base over here, and here if you see we have this app over here, right? So this app, what you can do is within this app we have color picker. So here if you come within app, you can add a padding over here of 40 pixels like this, and if you save the file you'll have a decent padding at the top, and you can play around with this. Okay, so this is looking decent and pretty good. You can play around with the color picker over here like this. Okay, and you can see how it's changing the color, right? So yeah, that's about the color picker, and this color picker has helped us reinforce the concept of states and how states can play a vital role in React components. And you can see how it is changing the background color. Essentially, it's changing the UI without you even refreshing the page. So this is really, really good, and this is the reason why I love React. All right, I hope you have been able to follow along, and I hope this was useful.